All right, ladies, I've been doing this podcast for a really long time, and I have interviewed well over 100 different guests. Well, there's two Australian gentlemen who have ridden the top of the charts now for many months. They
Neck
have
and neck.
neck and neck. They keep going past up and down with each other. They've gotten in fist fights over it. No. But no, really, they have had the most downloaded interviews out of all of my interviews over the last 5 years. With me today are my two friends from Australia, on the other side of the world, Marty Kendall and Maddie Lansdown. And
Hello.
today we are going to be doing a roundtable discussion, a very long roundtable discussion, 2 parts actually. And we're going to be answering some of your guys' questions that you sent in. We're going to be discussing all things weight loss and hormones and psychology of eating. We're going to be covering it all. So get excited because this is going to be good. So Marty Kendall is the author of the book Big Fat Keto Lies. He is an engineer who seeks to optimize nutrition using data-driven approach. His interest in nutrition began 18 years ago in an effort to help his wife Monica gain better control of her type 1 diabetes. But since then, he has worked to develop a systemized approach to nutrition tailored for a wide range of goals. Maddie Lansdown is a scientist, nutritionist, and health coach that specializes in weight loss and self-confidence for women and busy mothers. Maddie's extensive experience with nutrition led him to uncover the deeper challenge people have with health, which isn't about calories or kale, but in fact, mindset and behavior change. Having been on his own personal development journey, Maddie is now super passionate about showing people how to level up their health so that healthy habits and the best food choices are easy and natural. So welcome, my friends.
Great to be here again, Karen.
Yeah, thanks for getting us on.
I know, how exciting, right?
Totally.
I had to have you guys back because clearly the audience loves you. So why not have you back together? And we all come from a really different approach. Like what our niches are so different. And when you put them together, it's like we are the dream team. Truly, we really are. We were just talking before we started recording that we need to like run a resort, or what did we
a retreat. We're going to run a Mexican retreat.
Oh, and we're going to throw Mexico in there. Okay, perfect.
Yes,
we're going to do a Mexican retreat.
We're doing it.
I love it. And I know everybody else would too. But yeah, I just love that we all have such a different approach, and we've actually discussed how many people now have taken all of our programs, because they really do mold together so well. So awesome to have you guys here. So we're going to jump right into diet, because we're in a world today where we're getting so much mixed messages over what we should be doing, how we should be losing weight, what's best for us. I get all the time how confused people are, and they just are like throwing up their hands going, I don't even know what to do anymore or how to eat, because there's so much different information coming out there. So let's jump into the number one, probably most Google thing right now, which is fasting. I want to talk about fasting because today I was talking with somebody about how I had heard about, and I actually heard it on a podcast. I heard this podcast. I'm not going to name names. Two very well-known people in the fasting world who are pushing that women should be fasting every other day, as well as do an extended fast once a month. So what's your opinion on this? Let's go, Maddie. Let's hear what you got to say about it.
Go, Maddie.
Well, I think in my experience, and it's potentially the same for both of you, but a lot of women that have been cycling in and out of diets for so very long are already not eating enough food, or they've been on a lot of extremely low calorie diets as it is. And so the influence that has on the metabolism over 10, 20, 30, 40 years of dieting. And many of the people that I work with have been on a diet for literally 4 or 5 decades. And then you get to the idea of alternate day fasting, which is like, we're not just going to calorie restrict every second day. We're going to have no calories. So it's sort of, you're just doubling down on the same problem that has been created for you, which is not getting enough energy into the system to support the metabolism and everything you need. And you've obviously adapted to having not enough calories. And then, of course, when you're in a low calorie situation, I know Marty talks a lot about satiety as well, is that, you end up binge eating on the other side because you didn't get enough micronutrients, macronutrients, and as well, there's an emotional eating component too, that you've just subtracted every second day's worth of food, which previously also played some type of emotional role in your day, whether it be your coffee or whether it be that snack in the mid-afternoon, whatever it is. And so it really is an extreme form of fasting. Plus, of course, as you'll probably talk about, Karen, the influence on your hormones to just, what's 7 days in a week, and we've just hit 3 or 4 days of no food every week. Like that's pretty extreme.
Mm-hmm. Marty.
Yeah. I suppose I was really deep in the fasting thing a while ago with, we're talking about the keto background, and we all went on the keto craze, and then the fasting craze came along, and I did, multi-day fast. But I just see so many people, not eating is a great way to lose weight. It's the best way to lose weight, obviously. But what happens when you go to refeed? What are you going to eat when you refeed? And, I definitely went for the peanut butter and the butter that I was advised that I could eat as much as I wanted to, because it was, fat was satiating and it generated ketones. And I just realized that, if you get to that point where you're so hungry, you're eating anything and everything, you've lost track of your satiety signals and your true hunger signals, to the point that you're just going to overeat when you eat again. And if you're not, reaching for the nutrient dense, protein focused foods at that point, if you've gone too far. If you can't make good food choices, and it's definitely a rationalization at that point. When you're that hungry, you'll eat anything and everything. You'll go for the pizza and the donuts and go, I earned it. But what's happening at that point? You're not getting, as Maddie said, micronutrients. You're definitely not getting the protein that you need. So over time, you're going to be losing your precious lean muscle mass. You may be gaining back more fat when you do that. Your metabolism just becomes more and more deranged as you lose that precious muscle mass. So in our data-driven fasting, we sort of went, okay, blood sugar is good guide for whether you need to eat or not eat, and just wait till your blood sugars get to a point where, hey, you do need to refuel. You're a little bit below what is normal for you, but you're not so low that your appetite is just raging to the point you're going to overeat and eat really poorly at that point. So yeah, just finding a balance between eating and not eating that allows you to eat well when you do eat, I think is really critical. If you push it too far, you're just going to make really poor food choices at that point.
Yeah. And I think too, that could be a good protocol for a short period of time. Like if you're looking to, really jumpstart weight loss, and you've got a healthy adrenal system and thyroid, and you want to do this for a couple of weeks, like alternate day fasting, probably be okay. And it probably, would help with the weight loss, and it will help with the weight loss. Plus, the more weight you have to lose, I think the longer you could do that for before you start seeing those repercussions. Would you guys not agree?
Yeah, totally agree. And the other thing is too, like, you run the risk of, like, if you think about the psychology of every second day being like, oh, well, I'm not going to eat tomorrow. So you end up overeating, potentially ending the week on more calories than if you ate every single day. Because you're hungry from yesterday and you're preparing for tomorrow. Yeah. And so you're just smashing food on your on days. And so, do that for a few weeks, and the scale might go in the other direction.
Yeah,
totally. And the body composition will worse, and you'll be losing muscle mass. And the people who have done this intermittent fasting over the longest periods of time often don't tend to have the best body composition. It's look at what the bodybuilders do. They're making sure they get protein feeding on a regular basis throughout the day. So you don't need to have 6 meals of protein a day, but a couple is a really good point. Even one meal a day, most people struggle to get enough protein in that one meal, because they don't go, oh, let's have the chicken breast and broccoli and or kale even, Maddie, sorry about the kale, but there are some nutrients in the kale. But you're not going to gravitate to those foods. You're going to be going for the keto foods, and those keto foods, those magic, keto often to a lot of people means high fat, low protein, and that's just going to refill the fat stores that you just emptied. So you're going to look really healthy just before you eat again, but a couple of hours later you'll be undoing all that good work and deprivation.
Yeah. And I think too, we had someone, when my client came to me and said that this is what she had heard on this podcast, and she was super excited and she was going to do this because these people were saying to her, this is the only way that you can really lose weight, is to not eat every second day. And I said to her, if, your daughter had come to you 20 years ago, because her daughter's, not that old, but let's say a daughter came to a mother 20 years ago and said, in order to lose weight, Mom, I'm going to not eat every second day. And we looked at that person's calorie count throughout the week. We would have said this person has an eating disorder. We would have said that she's anorexic, and we would have put her into getting help, like with counseling, or into a center for anorexia and eating disorder. Mm-hmm. I know this because I was anorexic, and I know I've worked with enough people that have these issues, these eating disorders. And just because we're calling it fasting and we have doctors saying that this is okay, doesn't mean that it is okay. We're still causing, this is still a detriment to the body. And you have to think about it like that, is that okay for our biology as women, especially like with our hormones? What is that going to do when you're starving yourself like that, especially if you don't have a ton? Let's say you have, 50 pounds or less to lose. That's going to quickly start causing some damage to the system if you're really under eating throughout the week, because you will be. Same with when you're eating one meal a day. It's not enough to feed our hormonal system. Period.
Yeah, and your body can only release so much fat per day. And if you're really, really obese, then you don't really need to eat. And, you can fast for longer, but as you get leaner and leaner and leaner, you need to think more about your diet and nutrition and really prioritize giving your body what it needs, and a less aggressive approach. So you maintain your lean muscle mass, which is what enables you to keep your metabolism high, and you don't just waste away into a skinny fat skeleton with a bunch of baggy skin hanging off that can only eat 500 calories a day, because that's the corner you've backed yourself into by extended fasting.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is too, is assimilation, right? Is the absorption of those nutrients. And even if you were to do one meal a day, and technically eat all the calories and macros and micros that you needed, you're only going to absorb a percentage of that. So, I often say to people myself, like, I'm not a huge fan of even one meal a day because of that reason. Is that you're just not going to get it all in. You could technically eat it, but some of it's going to go out the back door.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that actually, Maddie, that you wouldn't absorb it all. So yeah, you'll become nutrient deficient.
And most of us don't gravitate to protein, like we said. And even you, Karen, in your recent little tracking experiment, keep talking about the amazing insights you had when you tracked your food and actually found out what you were eating. And you thinking, hey, I'm a health guru, I must be eating well. And you track your food, and what did you learn, Karen? This is a fascinating story.
Yeah, it was fascinating because
You've gone red.
Yeah, I did, didn't I? Well, because I come from a history of eating disorder, right? So I was bulimic. I wish desperately I was anorexic when I was younger. I have a lot of mental stuff around, tracking food, tracking what goes into my mouth. It triggers a lot of stuff for me. Immediately sets me back into that old mindset of fearing food and, like watching everything that goes through my mouth and freaking out about it. So I've always been somebody that I, like you just said, assuming I was eating really well because I'm a nutritionist and I really understand female weight loss. And so when I started working with my trainer, Pam Sherman, she made me track my food through MyFitnessPal. And at first I lied. I didn't realize it, but I was lying because I would put in every morning that I would have 40 calories of heavy cream in my coffee. And then, it tracked throughout the day. And as the weeks went on, I finally realized, and I was guesstimating all of these things. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to take this a little bit more seriously and I'm going to actually measure. And so on the weekend, when I drink more coffee, I thought, okay, I'm going to actually measure how much cream I'm putting in my coffee. Well, it turns out Karen was drinking 300 calories worth of heavy cream in her coffee every morning. And I was appalled. I was like, oh my goodness, that's really bad. And so I realized that, and I realized I was not able to get enough protein in. Like I had a really hard time for how much I had started to work out. I was still eating the same amount of protein that I was eating when I wasn't lifting weights. And was like 2 servings a day, and it wasn't enough. So to go, oh my gosh, I'm only eating like 60 grams of protein.
Wow.
So I had to really start to consciously go, okay, I need to start adding in more protein, which was pretty challenging for me. And I want to talk to you guys about protein actually in general.
It's fascinating how, like, even you with all your knowledge gravitate to the fat and the easy energy, and that's what we do even more at the end of our extended fast. We're not going for that high protein foods. We're going for the fat and the carbs, and ideally both together. So that's the magic dopamine overdrive food that fills our fat and carb store together. So yeah, what did you find when what did you increase your protein to? Any idea?
Yeah, I was just doing 2 or 3 small ones, servings of protein that would average to be about 60 grams in a day. So then I upped it to 3 servings and made sure I was actually getting a proper serving of protein per meal, because I was just eating these like little amounts, right? So I was always making sure I had protein with every meal, because if I don't, my blood sugar does get unstable and I get really hungry. So I always made sure I had this like nice, a little bit of fat, a little bit of good carb, and a little protein at every meal. So now I doubled that. So instead of having like 1 hamburger patty, I now have 2 in the morning for breakfast. Or my turkey sausages, I'll have a couple rather than just 1. So I started to just increase that way. And then I actually started to supplement with a beef protein isolate powder that is great. It's super clean, high in collagen. It's 21 grams per serving. So I started doing that as well to supplement in the afternoons when it was harder for me to eat protein in the afternoon.
It's amazing how hard it is to eat enough protein when you actually
really
track
hard.
it.
Okay,
And
so
it
let's
is,
talk about this.
yeah,
Really,
I find it fascinating that, like, tracking calories, it's definitely a mindset that people want to avoid, and it's a deprivation mindset that I have to keep under this calorie limit. But if you don't change what you eat, it is a real hiding to nowhere, and just tracking calories for the sake of limiting calories just doesn't work. But what we find is, from all the analysis, is people don't get enough protein. They don't get the protein they need. And if you track it, then you go, okay, I need to prioritize the protein and get enough protein. And then once you've got that in place, you can then more easily dial back the fat and carbs and go, okay, where is my fat coming from? It's 300 calories of heavy whipping cream with my coffee. I need to dial that back. And then you go, where's my carbs coming from? Am I getting too many carbs? Yeah, my blood sugars are okay, so I don't really need to dial back carbs more. But if your blood sugars are on this roller coaster that's causing you to crash, like you said, you get really hungry when your blood sugars drop really low. So you don't want that to happen. So dialing back the carbs a little bit is really helpful. So just finding that moderation balance. And I was raving to you guys before about, everybody has gone from low protein to high protein, and just, they see Ted Naiman and go, oh, high protein, high P's, great. And he's not really saying that. He's saying dial up your protein percentage just incrementally, find out where you are now and dial it up a little bit. Because if you dial it up too much, you're going to get to the point that you're so hungry, you're starving. And,
why do you say that though, Marty?
you,
Because most
you
people say the opposite. Most people say that it's so satiating and you put in all this protein and you won't be as hungry.
Yeah, and it is, but like most people are sitting on 10% protein, 15% protein, and they see Ted Naiman and go, oh, higher the better. I'm going to go 50 and I'm going to go 60% protein. So they're living on chicken breast and protein powder. And then eventually, like we mentioned before, your body can't release fat at a really high rate. There's a limit, the fatter you are, the more you're going to release. But if you're getting leaner, especially, there's a limit to how much fat you can release from storage each day. And once you get to that point, your body goes, okay, where am I going to get the energy? I'm either going to down regulate my, basal metabolic rate, which is not good, or I'm going to start burning into my own stores of muscle and energy stored on my body, which is not fat because I can only release so much body fat. And at that point, you get really, really hungry because your body doesn't want to use that muscle for energy. It wants to get real energy from fat and carbs. So if you overdo the protein percentage, your appetite will upregulate to the point that you'll find yourself binging. So it's a matter of going, okay, Karen's getting 60 grams of protein a day. Let's dial it up to 70 and dial back the fat and carbs a little bit. And I can do 70 for 3 days. I can do 80 for a week. And then let's dial it up a little bit more incrementally to the point that you're losing weight at a sustainable rate, but not, half to 1% a week is really nice. But to try and dial it up even more than that, you're probably going to get to a point where you're rebound binging.
Right. Yeah. Interesting, Maddie.
Well, I was just thinking as Marty was talking there too, a lot of people, I think there's a general consensus in the public that chicken and white meat is, it's lean. So that's what you've got to go towards. But in this instance that you're, replacing different, I guess, macronutrients, protein, that type of thing, a lot of people don't realize that your white meats, your chicken, in fact, spike your insulin. A lot of people are either don't know that or are shocked to find that. So if the thing that you go towards because of the diet culture kind of says chicken or white meat is the healthiest meat because fat is bad and steak's full of fat, and so you go from your current diet and you jump all the way over to just chicken and protein powder, well, both of those actually spike your insulin. So you're in a situation where instead of dropping that insulin, which you still will from a conventional diet, but you're in the situation where you're also driving up that hunger despite getting all of this protein in.
Yeah, I suppose well, Karen's turned off. I suppose to add to that though, that if your protein is providing greater satiety, this is where I think people get a little bit confused with the insulin. If the insulin and blood sugars spike and then crash, you're in trouble. But if the protein provides greater satiety such that you eat less across the day, you're like, I'm writing an article at the moment, updating an old article that talks about basal versus bolus insulin. And, my wife and my son, who are both type 1 diabetic, only about 20% of their insulin is around the food they eat each day. The rest is about just holding their body together. So the real critical thing is if you're bigger, your pancreas is pumping out all this insulin. So the way to really reduce your insulin is really to not be as big, which is about finding a way of eating that provides greater satiety and then it enables you to eat less across the day. So that's where protein is really helpful to provide greater satiety. But I agree with you that protein powder will be more quickly digested and won't provide as greater satiety as whole foods that'll provide, they'll digest slowly and provide satiety across 12 hours rather than just really quickly.
Yeah. And we follow the same kind of thing in the sense that, adding protein is kind of a feature of the way that we go, and it really helps people feel satiated. We don't obviously do the calorie thing in my world as much for a handful of reasons, but yeah, protein is a major feature, and it just people are like, oh, I just didn't want to snack anymore. But it really is shocking, just like you discovered, Karen, like how tiny the portion of protein that people were eating before. And in many instances, they like, because they're trying to be healthy, they just eat a bowl of veggies or they just have a salad, with almost no protein in it. So it's actually a really quick and easy and effective thing to just add a little bit more.
Yeah. And then it's way more satiating. Like if I just eat a chicken breast with broccoli, I'm hungry in 20 minutes. If I eat a great big steak with a little bit of potato and some veg, it'll last me, 6 hours rather than an hour if I was to eat something lean with no carbs and no fat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's a really good observation, that you need to find a balance between, getting the protein and energy from fat and carbs. You can't dial it. You can't dial all the fat and carbs all out at once. You may lose weight for a few days, but you look at the protein sparing modified fast studies, they lose weight the quickest, but 2 years later they've regained the weight because they didn't learn how to change how they ate on the way down.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Tell us what the protein modified sparing fast diet is. Did I say that right? Protein modified sparing fast. Yeah. I got the acronym written down on my piece of paper. So because it is, I like that program actually.
Yeah, protein sparing modified fast is basically something that a guy named George Bistrin came up with in the 70s when he looked at people, bedridden patients who are obese, and wanted them to lose body fat but not lean muscle. Obviously, lying in bed, your muscles atrophy and it's really scary. So they just, instead of infusing saline, they started infusing amino acids and more protein into the diet, and got really good results. And so that's been reinterpreted in different forms and fashions through the bodybuilding culture, and some really dangerous drinks that were just collagen, and people died and it was ugly.
Oh.
But every good thing was exploited in a bad way.
Yes.
Diet culture wonderfully. But but the studies show that increasing protein percentage will help you lose weight, body fat especially, the quickest, and you'll drop weight. But what they also show is that the people that learn to eat better, learn to eat whole food rather than relying on shakes, do better, have greater satiety, especially over the long term. And if you just start eating protein powder only for a couple of months, what are you going to eat when you get off that? It's just this temporary diet. You have to change how you eat on the way down, otherwise you're going to regain. And we typically find people can lose 1.5-2% per week, which is great, and if you're doing that, then more power to you. But in a macros class, we guide people we actually add back the calories if you're losing weight at more than 1% per week, just because we know that in a week or two you won't be continuing on that wonderful journey. You'll be going, I'm hungry and I'm rebounding and I've fallen off the wagon, I'm full of guilt and I can't do this diet and I'm a failure, and all that negative mental psychology just burns people out. So finding a point that you make enough change to lose at least 0.5% per week. Greater than 1% per week might be a little bit too aggressive, and it's not going to be sustainable in the weeks to come.
But that is mentally really hard for people to wrap their head around. And this is why I think we're seeing so much damage from ketogenic, carnivore, and fasting diets, is that it does work really well in the beginning. And you're like, wow, yeah, look at me, I'm just shedding all this weight. And so for you to turn around and then say to someone, oh, whoa, you're losing too much, you got to slow down and start adding some calories back in. Like most people would be like, no way, I'm going to keep doing this. And that's, I think, where we're seeing so many problems, because it's so hard to say, I'm going to stop my weight loss or slow it down. Like that's really, really hard to say. And then it's also hard to get out of if you've been doing it for a long time and you saw results in the beginning. People assume that they just need to do it harder, whatever it was that got them there, right? So, okay, well, fasting for 16 hours got me to lose 20 pounds. I've stalled. So now I'm going to go to one meal a day and fast for 24 hours or whatever it is. And they start to just think more is better, when really, with the way our physiology works and our, especially for the female hormonal system, you do have, like, the best way to lose weight is in stints. And when it comes to the PSMSF,
just say PMS. It's a hormonal podcast. That'll be fun.
the protein sparing modified fast.
There we go.
There we go. I have it spelled wrong on my thing. PSMF. I like it because it can be used in short stints where people can, what it is, everybody, is you're really upping the protein, although you are really downing the calories so that you preserve your muscle mass. Because in low calorie diets, you'll typically start tapping into the muscle stores for energy, and we don't want that. So this diet increases protein, but puts you in a pretty big calorie deficit. And then some people, I know it's been modified, the ones that I've seen and the ones that I created as well, you do have, a day every couple of days where you're increasing the calories back up to normal and kind of having a, big meal at the end of the day of whatever you want for mental purposes, as well as metabolic preservation.
Yeah.
So it does work well for that. And really it comes down, when it comes to weight loss, we really should be doing it in chunks. Like you do this for 4 weeks or alternate day fasting, maybe for 4 weeks, but then you pull out and you maintain that for, a good month of eating normal calories, whole foods, nailing that down and setting your new weight loss set point, because there is a lot to that set point and your body will fight to come back to that. So losing some weight and then holding it for 4 weeks is a really good idea, and you're going to get a lot better long-term results.
Holding at that point is the hard thing, though. A lot of people find it much easier to lose weight than maintain that weight. But I mean, my perspective is that every diet that works is somewhere between the Western, fat plus carb magic combo with minimal protein, because it's expensive to add the processed food versus the protein sparing modified fast. So just, every time you look at a plate of food, go, where is this on the scale of protein percentage? Does it suit my goals? Do I need a bit more protein and a bit less fat and carbs? But most people don't need to jump to the 50, 60%. We sort of guide people to work up towards 40% protein, but that provides a really nice satiety and rapid weight loss without being so extreme you're going to rebound binge.
Yeah. And so, Maddie, tell me about what you're doing in your program, because it's very different than what Marty's doing with his. Like, he's very data driven, likes his numbers, which I can appreciate way more now. And I think it's fantastic, but you don't do any of that.
Well, before I answer that question, I was just going to say too, in regards to weight loss in stages, often when I'm on the phone or on a Zoom call with people that are interested in my program and we're figuring out what they want to achieve, people say, oh, I want to lose 20 kilos or 30 kilos or, 50 pounds, 100 pounds, whatever it is. And whether we're talking, well, I'm like, okay, so what's a realistic goal in this time frame? And they're like 20 kilos. And I say, okay, let's look, I draw a picture of a mountain and I say, how long, say you're at the top of the mountain right now, how long did it take you to walk to the top of the mountain? Which is, how long did it take to put on that additional 30 kilos? And the answer is usually multiple decades, right? It's usually like 18 years, 25 years. And it's highly unlikely where it was then to totally overweight. There was lots of plateaus where your body was actually trying to get back to its original set point, but we kept overeating, right? And so this is the same kind of walking down the other side of the mountain approach. It's like, that's the method that you used to gain the weight, which was kind of intermittent, and there was lots of plateaus, and then you gained some more and then you dropped a little bit. And so we need to follow that same kind of path on the way back down. So I think, a lot of people think, instead of walking down the other side of the mountain, they're like, how about I just jump off the cliff here? And the splat at the bottom is returning to binge eating, right?
That's so great. I love that analogy. Yeah, that's perfect.
In a data-driven fasting program, people chase a lower pre-meal blood sugar and just wait until their blood sugar drops a little bit below what's normal for them, and then their target lowers and they get lower and lower. But after 3-4 weeks, initially they go, this is really easy, but after hard to do, and it's like, okay, take a break, practice maintenance. When you're in the right headspace again, you'll be ready to go again. But it's that maintaining in the middle is the important bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, agree. But to answer your question, so yeah, the scientist of the group doesn't use data. That's a bit confusing. So I guess for me, I worked in a cancer hospital initially, and everybody there was that a very vast majority of people were overweight. And that took me to then talking to everybody about nutrition and learning about food. And it turned out everybody knew what food was good for them. Like, generally speaking, meat's good. Came from a farm. That idea makes sense for most people, not everyone, but most. And I just got to the point where so many people had tried so many diets that I realized for me that I realized it was really in there. Know what to eat. The real question is, why can't I? And so a lot of that's got to do with diets that lack the idea of satiety and the correct amount of protein and nutrition to satiate somebody so they don't binge eat. Other than that, and I've obviously had lots of conversations with both of you, so you know that I'm all about peeling that onion. But it's that, like, a lot of it comes down to people use food to comfort themselves, to punish themselves, and actually, way, that's a really privileged position in the world to be in, with that we can actually use food for all of these different tools other than what it's actually intended for. And so I find a lot of people that have been on diets or that find my show are like, I've been on all the diets and they all worked for the time that I did them, but actually when I ended, it was like it was over. I was back to where I started. And that all comes down to how somebody uses food in their life as a tool, which comes down to their psychology and how they think about food, their relationship with food. And so the way I think about it generally is that if we can work with that group of people, which is pretty big, I would say. Women have been on, I saw a thing the other day, 61 studies by the time they're 50 years old, which is pretty epic. And it's like, if none of them have done the job long term, there's a giant missing piece, and that's, I think, the piece that sits in our mind. And then, like, even with my own group, we had a call last night about just the idea of why, when I'm really good, do I then go and reward myself with the exact foods that I did really good avoiding? And a lot of people do that. It's like they have a good healthy week, and on Friday night they're like, I'm proud of myself, let's get a bottle of wine.
Yeah.
Right. And so
and a
that's
cake.
Yeah, totally. And that's a psychological thing, right? Is because we're going towards that food because it makes us feel a certain way, because it makes us have an experience or feel comforted or feel like we're rewarded. So there's a lot of other things outside of food that we need to integrate into our life, so that after the diet, after the data, after MyFitnessPal is no longer on the priority list every day, that we have a new set of behaviors that we know how to navigate. Because most people have families and kids and they're underslept. They don't get to the gym enough, like all of the things. And this all contributes to a state of mind that makes poor decisions, right? For me too, right? I'm a human as well, right? When I'm underslept, I don't even have kids. I don't know how people do it, to be honest. But the point is that all of this contributes to a decision-making process that we all get to, where we often, after we're out of the program, we make the poor choice. And I think that comes off the basis that diet culture is sold on the idea of willpower, and willpower always runs out, because it's only short bursts that you can use it for, to get through the next set, to deal with this difficult person, and then after that moment, it's okay. And so I think we're all on the same page here, but that's why I always bang on with the line, one tweak a week. Instead of jumping all the way out of our comfort zone to the point that everything's foreign and confusing and overwhelming, and then in 2 weeks being like, oh, so glad that was over. It's like, this week, we're just going to look at breakfast. That's it. I don't care about any of your other meals. Like, we're going to nail breakfast. That might take us 3 weeks. Once we're there and that feels normal, then we're...
Start with a good meal at your first meal, and you're off to a good start for the day, hey?
Yeah. So generally, that's kind of where I come at it all from. So, but it doesn't mean that I don't think data is useful. I just think a lot of people can move a big rock in their diet world without having to do that nitty gritty stuff. And then there's heaps of utility for it. But then they can go to it once they've got a healthy relationship with themselves and with food, and they're okay on their own. Like, they're okay without the systems and the team and the professionals afterwards.
I got a question for Maddie. Last time you were on my podcast, we had a really good therapy session about dopamine and deep therapy session on the checks in the mail. But one thing I'm intrigued by and fascinated by, and I was even more at that time, is our world is in this constant dopamine overdrive situation. We're always getting a dopamine hit from our Instagram and Facebook and outrage culture and everything that, on social media that's trending is all about outrage that, gets our cortisol and everything going, and looking for this dopamine overdrive. And then that comes into our food world. So how does, that constant state of dopamine overdrive that we live in today, constant we eat, and how can we manage that and unwind that? And what are some things that you do? You had some great tips and techniques and living the ideal Zen life that I love. No kids, I think, is number one. But
yeah, don't have children. Too late. Put them back in the bag.
Pop them back up there.
It's a really good question about dopamine because, yeah, we are like Facebook and Instagram. They've literally got psychological engineers in Silicon Valley designing this stuff in order to make us trigger happy, essentially, with our phones, right? And they do the exact same thing with the way they flavor Doritos. Like every 9th Dorito has 5 times the amount of flavor, which triggers the gambling psychology, which means you keep going back in. So, like, these companies and food and technology, it is actively geared to manipulate your reptilian brain. So I think that awareness, first and foremost, is really useful to be like, oh, I'm not just addicted to this, like they're making me addicted to this. Their goal is to addict me to this process. And then that's a lot of the time we go towards comfort foods because we're seeking comfort, happiness, dopamine, right? That dopamine response. And so I talk about this a bit in the podcast and with clients too, but dopamine fasting in a way has to be a part of the solution because we use food so much for a dopamine hit. And that's got to start really small. Same thing, 1 tweak a week. It might be buying an alarm clock at night, and alarm clock technology, believe it or not, is amazing these days. My alarm clocks are magical. But turning the phone off at night, and putting it somewhere else, and start with 5 minutes before bed. And start like at 6 p.m. And then work up over time. And it's the same with, you can get app blockers. I use a lot of app blockers now as well that are preset and organized. And I haven't seen my Facebook newsfeed for years. I've got Newsfeed Eradicate Chrome plugin. And it's so good because, I'm a human. I get stuck in the grind and the scroll as well. Being deplatformed through Instagram was helpful as well. So I don't get stuck there either. But the point is to create space between you and stimulants. And that's not just social media. That's, like all sorts of activities that you go towards for pleasure or comfort.
Is this because we're getting so dulled to it? Like I do a lot of Dutch testing, and one of the markers is dopamine. And I would say 8 out of 10 people, their dopamine's low end or under range. And I'm like, is this a product of our society and our environment right now that we're so like tanked on the dopamine?
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you think about it, dopamine back in the day, for the first few thousand years, there was 3 core, there was probably more, but there was 3 core things that humans were driven to do that produced dopamine. Hunt, right, to get food and feed everybody, which is a huge energetic and emotional risk. So there's a lot of space between me and the dopamine hit, right? Sex. So, you've got to go through the courting phase and all the different things to be able to. So there's, again, a lot of space between you and the dopamine outcome. And then the other thing is to fight and defend and kill, right? And have that victory. Whereas now we don't have to put in any effort to produce a dopamine outcome. Amazon is almost to the point that they'll literally feed you. Like the next stage for Amazon Prime is that they'll put pizza in your mouth. So we literally don't have to put any effort into producing a dopamine response, which is how this social media stuff is so addictive. And same with sugar and soda. There's no risk to get a reward. It's just all reward. And so, we blunt our response and we build up a tolerance to that dopamine response that we don't register that those experiences are happening. So we go deeper in the chocolate. We go or we just get another one because we're tolerant of that
So
experience.
it really is like dulling down. Like isn't that interesting? Because it's like it's a drug. It's a drug.
You can exhaust your dopamine stores. There's a pool of dopamine, and every time you do something, it raises the dopamine and then crashes it. But you can actually deplete that dopamine pool. Tyrosine, an amino acid, helps fill it back up. And especially if you're not getting enough protein, your dopamine pool. But if you're always on that, you're desensitized to the dopamine. If you're always on that dopamine roller coaster, always peaking it out, and get burnt out to the point that you don't want to do anything. So the dopamine fast, the things that you're addicted to, enables you to focus more and do the things you actually want to. You don't get distracted when things get hard and go, let's scroll Instagram. You can actually focus more on the things that you choose to focus.
We could just break the rules and get removed.
Or that,
Or that. Don't do this at home, kids.
Not advised.
Sometimes envious of you, Maddie, that you were kicked off Instagram, because it just like eliminates that struggle.
I was in panic mode, and then I was liberated.
Yeah, exactly. It's awesome. Wow. Yeah. And, going back to, I was thinking about something when you were talking about just like the emotional eating thing and this dopamine. And one of the best things that I've learned, and I've helped, that I've told my clients about, my members, is that we have to remember humans are very addicted to that dopamine. We get very addicted to pleasure. We are creatures of pleasure, period, end of story. And the minute you think you're suffering or you are suffering, you will seek out pleasure. And so many people go into weight loss with a suffering mentality. I can't tell you how many times somebody would come to me and say, well, I'm eating really healthy and I've been following it and I'm doing so great, but I haven't lost a single pound. So I'm thinking, why should I be eating like this? So I just went back and ate to my old ways. And I'm like, you're associating eating healthy with something negative and painful. And you can't do that. You have to get excited about it. You have to go, I want to eat healthy, even if I don't lose weight. I want to eat healthy. And you have to change that mindset, because if you don't, it is a matter of time before that willpower runs out and you're going to go for that dopamine hit.
And when you reverse it and say, I'm trying to nourish my body because I want optimal performance, I'm getting the protein, I'm getting vitamins, I'm getting minerals because I want to perform to the best. You sort of change that around, and rather than deprivation and going, I can't have those donuts that I want, that are those magical carb and fat combo foods that overdrive the dopamine. You're going for, what foods can I give my body that it's craving and satisfying? Craving the junk food that always derails me. So it's always about nourishing your body first, and then the cravings settle down. It's not about deprivation and calorie counting. It's about let's make sure we're period of time to make sure you're getting the protein, to make sure you're getting the vitamins and minerals and omega-3 that your body actually needs, because otherwise it's going to crave it and eat through all the trash that you've got in your cupboard until it gets enough of those to survive.
Yeah. And you do a lot around minerals. Hey, Marty, like how much do you see that really affecting people's eating behavior? Like when they actually get the right nutrient stores and they're eating nutrient dense foods, what are you seeing in your data? It's showing that it's really like that it's working, that it really does help with cravings and mood and mental stuff, right?
Yeah, Maddie, if you can just turn off the audio for a bit, I'm going to talk about data and you'll be offended. But so we've got 125,000 days of data from 35,000 people that have done used Nutrient Optimizer, and the protein is definitely the most satiating nutrient. All the amino acids, as we get more of those within our calorie budget, we eat less. But also sodium, potassium, calcium. Potassium's massive. Just people aren't getting enough potassium in their diet because we're not eating those green non-starchy veggies like kale and spinach. Sorry, kale again, Maddie. But we're not eating that you don't have to eat kale, but just anything that contains potassium is massively satiating. And like
I didn't know
we
that.
moving from low protein to high protein will drop your calorie intake by about 55%. Potassium's 49%, I think. So people who eat more potassium, but it's not just one nutrient that you can go, let's get a pill bottle and like Dave Asprey jam 150 pills down your throat each morning and believe in that you just blew $1,000 a week on supplements. It's about the whole matrix of food, of protein, with the minerals and vitamins and the forms that your body understands, and the ratios that work for your body, that aren't going to throw those ratios out and your body goes, I understand this food. I don't need to go searching for that crap food. So when you prioritize nourishing your body, you do have dopamine cravings for all those nutrients as well, and you get rewarded by your body when you get those nutrients from your food, and then you're satisfied and you don't go searching for the trash food. So yeah, it's not about deprivation, it's about nourishing your body. And once you reframe it to say, how can I pack as many of those essential nutrients into my calorie budget each day? Because I love my body and I want it to thrive and perform. Everything else settles down and people go, I've lost interest in food, I'm not hungry anymore. And it's this massive shift from being I'm so addicted to food to being, I'm really satisfied.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. Do you think that, like, I was hearing a woman talk the other day about her thing is to eat, she wants people to eat women to eat 50 grams of protein at every meal. And I was like, I couldn't do that. Like, I really feel there's a protein threshold and it's there for a reason. I don't know what it is. Do you know? Do you think we have a protein threshold where it's like, okay, I can't eat anymore, I'm going to puke. It's just gross. We don't have one for carbs, but
there's a limit to how much protein your body can use. And once you get to that point, it goes, well, I can't do anything with this protein because I've created neurotransmitters and I've rebuilt my muscles and I've created insulin and all the things your body does with protein. And at that point, all it can do is try to use gluconeogenesis to convert it to ATP to be used for energy. And at that point, it's like, that's really hard for me to do. It takes a lot of effort to take protein to make energy. So why don't you give me some fat and carbs, because that's a whole lot easier. So that's how the cravings work. And that's why you get to a point where you've had enough protein. And then at that point, you go searching for the donuts because you've been really good and just eating chicken breast and protein powder. So that's why we sort of say, you get the meat sweats. And for the bodybuilders to eat enough protein it upregulates your metabolism, because it's such a
thermogenic
thermogenic process that you're losing 25 to 35% of the energy in that protein. You actually lose it as heat as you're turning it into muscle and digesting it. So it's a very inefficient source of energy. So your body says, I've had enough. Let's get some easy energy from fat and carbs. That's why there's sort of a limit to how much you can eat. And 150 grams is probably, definitely upper end. And maybe if you're working out like a maniac and doing a lot of resistance training, you will crave more protein. But most people, we just say, track what you're currently eating. It's probably pretty close. Maybe dial it up a little bit, but the focus needs to be dialing back the energy, the easy energy from fat and carbs, while prioritizing protein. It's sort of that balanced mindset that enables people to make consistent progress forward.
What do you guys both find is the best? Like, I think everybody takes something different, like macros, and you're helping people to discover that, Marty. And I think I do that too. Like, I really help women to find their perfect diet, and it's not always just keto or vegan, paleo, whatever. These labels, they all work for somebody. That's what I think. Is there, though, in your guys's work and your programs and what you're seeing, do you happen to see like a way of eating that definitely seems to work for the masses?
Go first, Maddie. I've raved on.
I love it when you rave on. A baseline threshold of what should work in theory for most people being low carb and strictly not no carb. So I work pretty much exclusively with women. The odd fella comes through the system. Most of them seem too stubborn to come and talk about their feelings to me. But yeah, so we usually go to a low carb, and making sure that we do factor in, like, I kind of split it up to above ground vegetables, avoid that sugar spike, and then any root vegetables that don't trigger sugar cravings are prioritized of an evening type thing. So that's kind of the general thing. But then as we go through the program, it's based on conversations and progress and movement. Then we move the needle from there. And it's like, yeah, we might need to dial this up, dial that there. But protein's a feature of all of it. Everybody needs to get their protein up, basically. There's not too many people that come through the door that are like, yeah, I'm eating a steak at every. So yeah, it's generally start with low carb.
And when you say low carb, like, can you give us a number of like what you like to see it in as far as total carb count?
Don't track anything. The issue with the people that I work with is, yeah, that they've calorie counted, they're obsessed, they got super obsessive, and they're so sick of data. They're like, I've looked at numbers, and they might have been not doing it correctly, totally possible, but it's more about their relationship with their food. And if they hate the process, or go in, like you were talking before, Marty, about with this deprivation, or sorry, you, Karen, this deprivation mindset to like, oh, another diet. Oh my God, I'm going to hate myself. I'm going to eat all this, healthy food. And then I can't wait for week 13 when I get to eat pizza again. Like, I'm trying to fix that so that they can just be okay with living healthy on their own. So it's more about, we share photos of plates type thing. So, because a lot of people are, in my experience, a lot of people are going from overwhelmed, confused, and sort of got so much knowledge because they've listened to 300 podcasts between the three of us, as well as everybody else. Yes. They're like, there's so much information in my head. I just need someone to tell me what to eat. Right. So I just guide people. There's got to be this much of the plate should be approximately protein, this much approximately fat, this much approximately carbs. We start there. And that usually sorts out the first 10 to 20 kilograms.
Right. Yeah, I bet.
That's a great start. Yeah, I love the above ground root vegetables for earlier in the day. That seems to work well. Prioritize protein and nutrients, we say, earlier in the day when you first feel hungry. Most people have got elevated blood sugars, so they don't need more glucose, they don't need more carbohydrate earlier in the day. But a lot of people, especially on a lower carb style diet, the blood sugars start to drop later in the day and they get really hungry. So if you're going to have carbs in the day, your last meal tends to be a good place to just bump your glucose back up. So you're going to sleep not starving, not with high ketones. You're going to sleep better. You're going to wake feeling better the next day. And protein across the day. But yeah, 150 grams for women is probably on the upper end. But yeah, if you start on 15%, just work your way up to 20% the next week by dialing back fat and carbs and allowing yourself to eat as much protein as you can, and then 25%. And then if you get to 40%, then great. No need to push it greater than that, because as I said, that's hard to sustain at that point. Yeah, you end up rebound binging because you need some energy.
Yeah.
What about you, Karen? What do you find from a dietary perspective works with your hormonal clients?
And that's what, like, I have an issue also with data stuff a little bit, because
we're just beating up on Marty today.
Screw data. No,
you can't handle the truth.
That's awesome. No, I really see I know that data is very important, and I have come a long ways with it. However, where my journey started was with data, and I was calorie counting, and I didn't have food addiction. I wasn't like, I got to eat the cookies. And I never had that. So it was easy for me to eat healthy, lower my calories, exercise like crazy. And I was hardly eating, and I was only getting fatter. And so that's a lot of what the women that come to me that's where they're coming. That's the world they're coming from, which is I've dropped my calories down to 1,000 calories, 1,200 calories, 800 calories. I'm fasting. I've done low carb, I've done moderate carb, and I can't lose a pound. So that whole theory of being in the caloric deficit and watching the macros and the percentages, it doesn't work for them because they have hormonal dysfunction happening. And so it doesn't matter how much they eat. It doesn't make any difference. And that's such a frustrating place to be at, where you feel like, how is this possible that I can be in a caloric deficit and my body will not access my fat stores? So when I work with women, I've been doing this now this is my 9th year of this company. I've run the gamut. I've done it all. I've done the paleo down. I've worked with vegans. I've done fasting. I've done keto. I've done carnivore. And working with thousands of women and just kind of collecting the data, what I've come up with is, we have to, like I talked about before, you have to do weight loss in stints, but you also have to prepare the body for weight loss, especially the women that come to me. And that's going to look different for everybody. You may need to let go of some toxins, like whether you've got heavy metals or you're just living in a very toxic world and you got to clean up your environment. You got to quit drinking, clean up the liver, upregulate the detox pathways. We got to maybe do some hormone replacement therapy, because without hormones, your body will have a hard time letting go of that fat. So if you're an older woman, not older, perimenopausal or menopausal, 40 years and up young, then you may need to replace the hormones in order for the body to let go of the fat. Or if you're a younger fertile woman, you just need to balance out these hormones so that the body has the tools to go, oh, okay, I'll let go of the weight now. So it's really about finding what could be causing it besides the calorie deficit, or increase, whatever. Like, you really need to get down to that. And then you do it in stints where you do, a month of weight loss, or you do it throughout the week where I, increase calories one day and then I drop them really low the next day. So they do an intermittent fasting day, maybe 3 days a week, where they're maybe going till 12 or till 2, because our bodies will adjust to anything we do. So something that works in the beginning will stop working. We all know this, right? And this is why people go from one diet to the next, because it stops working. So even if they did it right and they were successful with it, it still stops working, and your body will adjust. So if you go down to 1,200 calories and you lose weight from it, well, guess what? Your metabolic rate is going to go, and it's going to come down to meet that intake of food. And now you're no longer losing weight, and you have to drop the calories even farther now to get any more results. And so doing it in a cyclical manner to preserve the metabolism and preserve the hormones, give the body what it needs for the hormones, the detoxification, liver support, that I see work by far the very best for my ladies.
Well, and you touched on something there too, like that, and we kind of mentioned it before too, but that idea of like reverse dieting, right? To recover the metabolism and doing that weight loss in stints, of like, dropping your intake, or whether that looks like increasing your intermittent fasting window or whatever it looks like, but then the next month to be like, oh, we're going to open it up and we're going to actually add back in a snack or a meal, and it really is kind of confronting. People go into fear of like, I'm going to go back to that body that I don't want, and I'm eating more food, but it kind of is this like, up and down flow as we progressively move towards the goal.
Yeah. Marty, were you going to say something there?
Like, in Australia, it's harder to get the testing and the hormones and the like. What are the top 3 things that you recommend to optimize hormones without those sort of interventions?
What are the top things that I use? Say it again.
Oh, what are the
you
top
cut
3
off,
things?
sorry.
Yeah, sorry, the internet connection is a little bit weird, but the top 3 things you'd recommend people do to optimize the hormones if they can't get access to the testing or the bioidentical hormones, the DHEA, and Amazon doesn't ship you every drug you want in Australia or something.
Do you guys have no Do you have no access at all to bioidentical hormones? Like what about progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone?
Through prescribers, but yeah, well, optimize those things naturally without if your doctor isn't going to give you testosterone or DHEA.
They won't.
It's very hard to get in Australia.
Then there's a lot of things that you can do that are plant-based for hormones. That's what I would recommend. Really hard with the progesterone, but there are things that can help. Like if you're perimenopausal or you're going into menopause, you don't have access to the hormones, then I would recommend starting with phytoestrogens. So using things like flax is the number one most phytoestrogenic food. So putting in like a tablespoon of ground flax every day, taking a menopause supplement that has like the black cohosh, the sage in it, the Vitex, can be really, really helpful. I just had a woman earlier today who's, she's in her 60s. She's still having hot flashes. She's never done HRT, and she's getting, she just started in on a menopause supplement. And she says it's helped immensely to get rid of her hot flashes. So that and adrenal care. If you do, because your adrenals can take over a little bit of the production of those hormones, especially testosterone, but it will make these other, like once your ovaries shut down, the adrenal system will make little amounts of progesterone, estrogen, testosterone, DHEA. And so if you are a highly stressed out person, which everybody is right now, then your body will always prefer to make that cortisol because it's a survival hormone. So it's going to take, if you're always if you're always raising cortisol up and your blood sugar's unstable and you're running around and you got kids and a business like me and you're highly stressed out and you work too much, then your adrenal system is going to be suffering, which means it won't be producing those hormones. And women will go through menopause a lot harder when they're like that. So just nourishing yourself, taking care of your body, taking care of these stress levels in your life can really go a long, long way. So doing plant medicine and the stress, I think, are the two top things that you can do. And lifting weights, I think, is huge. Controlling blood sugar is huge. I mean, just that alone can do so much for hot flashes and night sweats and the weight gain and things like that. So, yeah.
When you said plant medicine, I instantly went to ayahuasca.
Yeah. All you got to do is hop on some mushrooms, some ayahuasca, acid, ketamine. You pick one of those and you'll probably be fine.
And use my referral code. Just kidding.
Yeah.
Karen, when you mentioned flax there, is that a reference to seed cycling? Do you do seed cycling?
Seed cycling can work pretty well for fertile women. So if you're still cycling, it does have an impact. And I have had a lot of good success with it with fertile women that are in their younger years. Mm-hmm. And that's, flax in the first half with, I can't remember which one, sesame in the first half of the cycle, and then pumpkin and sunflower, I think, in the second half of the cycle, which help to produce progesterone. So it can work actually pretty good for that. In just minerals in general, right? Like you need vitamin C, zinc to make progesterone, to nourish the adrenal system, all those, high density foods that Marty talks about is great. It's great for the hormonal system.
Maddie, what do you do to help people manage their cortisol, their stress levels? What are the first things there's a lot of things you can jump into to manage stress? What do you think is the best things that work for most people?
Oh, good question. Well, and that's hard because a lot of people are stressed by different things. They get their source of stress from different things. The first thing is, it's kind of typical rabbit hole me answer, but is to understand why you're addicted to the stress. Because a lot of us, just like we're addicted to dopamine, is we remove the dopamine source or the cortisol source, and we're kind of like, what now? Like, what's the point of my existence? What's the point of life?
Where's the adrenaline rush?
Yeah, exactly. People are running on this. So understanding its purpose first is really useful because you've got to find something that kind of satiates that emotional requirement. But I think breath work is a really useful tool. It's really rapid. I get people to do that whether they're stressed, before they eat, in any type of situation, before sleep. just to bring that cortisol down, hopefully move into the parasympathetic and just improve digestion. And you can do like the 4-7-8 is what I usually encourage people to do.
Maddie.
It's great,
I love
right?
it.
Yeah.
Love
So
it.
even if you do it for 2 minutes or 10 minutes, like, yeah, it's going to produce a benefit. So
What does it look like in practice? What's 4-7-8?
You've never heard of that?
Well,
geez, where have you been? Stuck in your data?
No, I actually use a breathing. I've found it really helpful to go into the breathwork thing, but just the tracking my HRV while I'm doing just breathing in and out and relaxing for 5 minutes a few times a day has just helped me calm the adrenaline and cortisol and dopamine, and then you can go back and focus on what you want to focus on. But I'm intrigued in the 4-7-8.
It's very old. It's thousands of years old.
Yeah, it's super simple. So you just breathe in over a period of 4 seconds. So you just breathe in and then you hold it like a really a diaphragm belly breath. You hold it in there for 7 and then you just slowly release it for 8 and then repeat. And
you inhale through your nose. So to a count of 4, you hold it for a count of 7 and then breathe out through the mouth for a count of 8. And you're only supposed to do it, I think, a couple minutes when you first start. And then you work your way up to doing it a little bit longer. If you Google Andrew Weil 4-7-8, he has a really nice video about it that I send all my clients. And it's one of the practices that I've been able to stick with for years. And it instantaneously lowers your stress. Like I'll be traveling or having anxiety about something and I'll do a couple rounds and it's like instantaneous down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've definitely found that the breathing exercise on a regular basis actually increased my heart rate variability and just overall stress levels, cortisol levels. And it's been really, really helpful. And then I can be more productive on the things I want to be productive rather than all the fear, stress things that what if I'm not keeping up with this social media or that social media? I wonder what's happening on Twitter and I wonder what people think of me over here and why aren't people thinking of me? You know, it's all that mind game just settles down and you go, oh, this is what I need to do and I'm going to do it.
Well, and the other thing I would say after like breath work's really good in the moment and it's a really good practical thing. But a lot of the things that we're stressed about are things we can't change. So we have to change the story about them, like whether it be our annoying boss, a relationship that's going through a difficult phase, you know, kids, whatever it is. So it's like you obviously can't walk away from those. So one thing that I like the idea of is removing it from the physical body by journaling. So it's like it's this thought, this feeling that's in our body and it's raising our hormones, our cortisol and our adrenaline to have this response. So physically getting it out of the body by writing it down, even if it's bullet journaling, just writing partner's annoying, kids are driving me crazy, you know, like just really time saving type stuff. You can obviously write it all out in paragraphs if you've got time, but yeah, moving that frustration out of your body into a book or a paper or something like that is really good to just download that out of your physical being.
Yeah. Or changing your perception of it. I find that to be one of the most powerful things too. Like when you're talking about these things that you can't change, like you can't escape the family. You can't, is there a way that you could change the perception of something negative into something positive, right? Because we tend to just go down that negative pathway so fast. Like, oh, my job sucks because my boss is such a dink and blah, blah, blah. And, or you're just complaining or whining about all the millions of things in your life. Why not just say, is there something positive that I could change this into? Like, hey, you know what? I'm really happy I got a job. Like, I'm lucky I got this job. And yeah, my boss isn't the greatest, but that's his crap. And I'm not going to let it bug me, or whatever it might be. Is just, you can always change your perception. You can change how you feel about something. And a lot of people don't realize that they have the power to do that.
Yeah, gratitude's such an important practice. And I think that's one common thread through looking into any successful people or really healthy people that are, seem to be getting it mostly right. Is that, gratitude is an important part of their practice. And we don't all feel grateful every single day. Some days I'm like, especially in the middle of lockdowns, everyone was like, just be grateful. I was like, I don't give a shit about anything. Like, and so, but practicing gratitude most days, and when we're talking about diets, like a lot of people like, oh, I've got to go to the gym and I suck at everything. Switch that into like a celebration that you can move your body. Your body has capacity to make change, so just that shift of perspective and story, like you mentioned.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, well, we are coming up to almost an hour and a half here, gentlemen. So I think it's going to be, we're going to have to save part 2 for another time. And we will record just a Q&A between all 3 of us for part 2. Because really, you and I, all 3 of us, we could just keep going here. Like, I want to ask you guys so many more questions, but we'll let this be a long enough podcast at an hour and a half. So any
Sounds
final
good.
words on this segment?
It's been a ton of fun. Great to chat to you guys. I think we're all on the same wavelength and contribute nicely. It's been really good.
I think so too.
And retreat coming to a country near you soon.
Problem in that country may just be Mexico. So
Ayahuasca shaman option.
That's the VIP package.
and you'll be able to use our coupon code for the ayahuasca. All right, guys, thanks so much. And I look forward to part 2 Q&A with my 2 Australian powerhouses. I look forward to it, guys. Thanks for being here.
Let's do it. Thanks, Karen.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks, Marty.